What if every single dream you've ever had was actually a message? Not just random noise from your brain trying to process the day, but a real, deliberate communication from the deepest part of yourself, using a language so ancient it predates words, predates writing, predates civilization itself. What if you've been receiving these messages your whole life and didn't know how to read them? Here's what's even more unsettling. The symbols showing up in your dreams, in the art you're drawn to, in the stories that make you cry for reasons you can't explain, they're not random. They follow rules. They have meanings. And once you understand those meanings, you cannot unsee them. You will start recognizing them everywhere. In movies, in advertising, in the behavior of people around you, in your own choices that you thought were completely logical and rational. None of it is random, one of it. Today we're going to go deep. We're going to pull back the curtain on the unconscious language of symbols and explore what your mind is actually trying to tell you. By the end of this video, you're going to look at your inner life completely differently. Stay with me, because what comes next will genuinely change how you see yourself. Let's start with a question that seems simple but absolutely isn't. Why do humans use symbols at all? Why didn't we evolve to communicate everything directly and clearly? Why do we dream in images instead of just waking up with a neat list of psychological insights? Why does a red rose make your heart ache in a way that the words romantic love never quite manage to capture? The answer goes all the way back to how your brain is built. You have two systems running simultaneously inside your skull. There's the conscious, verbal, logical mind that you think of as you, the part reading these words right now, the part that plans your week and debates whether to text someone back. And then there's the other system, much older, much faster, much more powerful. This system doesn't use words. It never has. It thinks in pictures, feelings, patterns, and symbols. Neuroscientists estimate that your conscious mind processes about 40 bits of information per second. 40. That sounds like a lot until you learn that your unconscious mind processes somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 million bits per second. 11 million versus 40. Your unconscious isn't just a little smarter than your conscious mind. It is operating in a completely different league, and it's doing most of the actual work of keeping you alive, keeping you connected to other people, and navigating the incredibly complex social and emotional world you live in every single day. But here's the problem. That unconscious system can't just tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I've been analyzing your relationship patterns for the past 3 years, and I think we need to talk." It doesn't have access to language in that direct way. So instead, it does something much more creative. It sends symbols. Carl Jung, one of the most important psychologists who ever lived, spent decades studying this phenomenon. He noticed something that genuinely disturbed him at first. When he analyzed the dreams and fantasies of his patients, he kept finding the same images appearing over and over again. Images that his patients couldn't possibly have encountered in their own lives. A patient who had never studied mythology would dream of a hero slaying a dragon using details that matched ancient Greek stories precisely. A patient who did not know alchemy would produce drawings that were nearly identical to medieval alchemical manuscripts. How is that possible? Jung concluded that beneath the personal unconscious, the layer of your mind that holds your own memories and repressed experiences, there was something deeper, something shared. He called it the collective unconscious, a vast, inherited reservoir of human experience encoded not in words or explicit memories, but in patterns, in archetypes, in symbols that every human being carries simply by virtue of being human. This is a radical idea, and it still makes many people uncomfortable. We like to think of ourselves as individuals. We like to think our inner life is uniquely ours, and in many ways it is. But at the deepest level, you are also running software that is millions of years old, software that every human shares, and that software communicates in symbols. Let's get specific. Let's talk about some of the most powerful and universal symbols that show up across cultures, across history, and almost certainly in your own psychology. Water. Water shows up in virtually every human mythology and spiritual tradition on Earth, and it always means more or less the same thing. The unconscious mind itself. Emotion, the unknown depths of the self. When you dream of water, your unconscious is talking about your emotional life. Calm, clear water often signals emotional clarity or peace. A violent storm at sea can signal inner turmoil you haven't consciously acknowledged. Being underwater, unable to breathe, is one of the most common anxiety dreams there is. Being pulled under by a current represents feeling overwhelmed by emotions or circumstances you can't control. But here's what's fascinating. You already knew this, didn't you? On some level, think about the language you use every day. We say someone is drowning in problems. We say emotions flood over us. We say a difficult conversation was deep. We say someone is shallow. We say we need to stay afloat. We dive into a new project. We feel at sea when we're confused. The metaphors of water for emotional and psychological states are so deeply embedded in our language that we no longer notice them. But they didn't get there by accident. They got there because the unconscious mind was using water as a symbol long before language existed to name the connection. Now let's talk about fire. Fire is transformation, destruction that makes way for something new. Passion, creativity, danger. In dreams, fire often appears at moments of major psychological change. It can be terrifying, especially if you're afraid of that change. But fire that you're watching from a safe distance, fire that's contained, fire that you're tending, those often signal that transformation is happening healthily, that you're consciously participating in your own change. There's a reason the phoenix is one of the most universally recognizable symbols across cultures. Rising from the ashes, death and rebirth. The idea that destruction can be the beginning of something extraordinary rather than just an ending. Every culture that has ever existed, independently, came up with some version of this symbol because every human being goes through cycles of loss and renewal, and the psyche needs a way to represent that process. Think about the moments in your own life when everything fell apart. Job loss, a relationship ending, a health crisis. An identity you'd built for yourself is suddenly crumbling. In the moment, those experiences are devastating. But look back from a distance, and what do many people find? Those were the turning points. That the version of themselves that emerged from that fire was more authentic, more resilient, more real than the one that went in. The symbol of the phoenix isn't just a pretty story. It's the unconscious mind's way of reminding you that you've survived transformation before and you can do it again. Let's talk about the shadow. This is one of Jung's most important and most misunderstood concepts. Your shadow is everything you don't want to admit is part of you. The anger you've been told is unacceptable. The jealousy you feel toward people you're supposed to love. The ambition you've hidden because it didn't seem modest enough. The sexuality you've repressed because of shame or fear. The cruelty you're capable of. The laziness. The selfishness. Every human being has all of these things, every single one. The difference isn't whether you have a shadow. The difference is whether you know it or not. The people who don't know their shadow don't stop having these impulses. They stop owning them. Instead, they project them. Suddenly, the anger they can't acknowledge in themselves becomes, everyone around me is so aggressive. The jealousy they can't face becomes, that person is so arrogant, they think they're better than everyone. The ambition they've buried gives rise to deep resentment toward anyone who succeeds. Your shadow appears in your dreams in specific ways. It often shows up as a figure of the same gender as you, a dark twin, a pursuer, someone threatening. When you dream of being chased and you don't know why you're running, ask yourself, what quality does the thing chasing you seem to represent? Is it wild and uncontrolled? Is it angry? Is it sexual? Is it powerful in a way that frightens you? That quality is almost certainly something in yourself that you haven't made peace with yet. Jung said that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Until you know your shadow, it owns you. It makes your decisions for you. It chooses who you fall in love with. It determines what makes you irrationally angry, what makes you ashamed without reason, and what you can't stop doing even when you consciously want to stop. The work of integrating your shadow is some of the most important psychological work a human being can do. And it begins with recognizing the symbols through which your shadow tries to communicate with you. Now let's talk about something that's going to feel very concrete and personal. Let's talk about recurring symbols. Because if you have a symbol that keeps showing up in your life, in dreams, in the stories you're drawn to, in the images that haunt you, that repetition is not a coincidence. Your unconscious is trying very hard to get a message through. Some people have recurring dreams about teeth falling out. This is one of the most common dream symbols in the world. Researchers have documented it across cultures with no shared history. Teeth represent, among other things, power, confidence, and the ability to process the world. Your teeth let you take something hard and make it manageable. Dreaming of losing teeth is almost universally connected to anxiety about loss of control, loss of power, or fears about how you appear to others. If this dream keeps visiting you, your unconscious is asking you to look at where in your waking life you feel powerless or embarrassed or like you're losing your grip. Some people are haunted by dreams of falling. Falling dreams are associated with anxiety, with feeling unsupported, with fear of failure or loss. But here's something that most people don't know. The meaning of a falling dream changes dramatically depending on whether you hit the ground or not. If you always wake up before you land, that's your nervous system protecting you from something it thinks you can't handle yet. If you've ever hit the ground in a falling dream and survived, many psychologists consider that a breakthrough moment, the unconscious showing you that you can face the thing you're afraid of and not be destroyed by it. Some people dream of houses. Houses are one of the richest and most complex symbols in the entire language of the unconscious. A house in a dream almost always represents the self, the psyche itself. The different rooms are different aspects of your personality or your life. The basement is the unconscious, the foundational, often the stuff you've stored away and don't want to look at. The attic is memory, history, the accumulated past. The facade of the house is how you present yourself to the world. A crumbling house can signal that your sense of self is under strain. Discovering a new room in a house you thought you knew completely. And this is a dream many people have. Discovering a room you didn't know was there. That almost universally represents discovering a new aspect of yourself, a new capability, a new dimension of who you are. Pay attention to the houses in your dreams. They're blueprints of your inner world. Now here's where this gets really interesting and maybe a little uncomfortable. Because the symbolic language of the unconscious doesn't just operate in dreams. It operates in your waking life too, and it influences your decisions far more than you probably realize. Have you ever been inexplicably drawn to a particular type of person in relationships, and then been surprised when those relationships follow the same painful pattern over and over again? That's not bad luck. That's not a coincidence. That's the unconscious mind acting out a symbolic drama. It's drawn to certain dynamics because something in those dynamics matches an inner pattern, a complex, built usually from early experiences that it's trying to resolve. The person who always falls for emotionally unavailable partners isn't doing it because they enjoy suffering. They're doing it because the unconscious has a template, usually formed in childhood, a pattern around love being conditional or withheld, and it keeps recreating the conditions of that original wound, hoping this time the story will end differently. Hoping this time the unavailable person will finally choose them, finally commit, finally provide the love that felt so precarious early in life. Understanding this pattern as a symbolic drama, rather than just as a frustrating series of bad choices, can be genuinely liberating. Because you can ask different questions. Instead of, why does this keep happening to me? You can ask, what is this pattern trying to heal? What is my unconscious working on? And is there a more direct way to address that core wound rather than playing this drama out again? Let's talk about the symbols in culture, because once you learn to see this language, you'll start seeing it absolutely everywhere. Every great myth, every fairy tale, every truly enduring story follows symbolic patterns that map onto universal psychological experiences. This is why certain stories never die. This is why the same basic narratives get told and retold across thousands of years and hundreds of cultures. It's not that humans lack imagination. It's that these stories are describing something real about the structure of the human psyche, the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell spent most of his career documenting the fact that virtually every culture on Earth tells the same fundamental story. A hero in ordinary life receives a call to adventure. They resist the call. They cross a threshold into an unknown world. They face trials. They encounter a mentor. They reach the deepest challenge, the innermost cave, the darkest moment. They find something essential there. They return transformed, bringing that essential thing back to their community. You've seen this story 1,000 times. In ancient mythology, in Shakespeare, in Hollywood blockbusters, in the world's great religious texts, in the stories that your grandparents told you when you were small. But you've also lived it. Every significant transition in your life follows this pattern. Every time you've been forced out of your comfort zone, faced your deepest fear, and come through it changed, you've been living the hero's journey. The reason this story is told everywhere and never stops resonating is that it's a symbolic map of actual psychological growth. The unconscious mind recognizes it as true because it is true to the structure of how human beings develop and change and come into themselves. The trickster. In virtually every mythology, there's a figure who breaks rules, who disrupts order, who turns things upside down and makes chaos. Loki in Norse mythology, Coyote in Native American traditions, Hermes in Greek mythology, Anansi in West African stories. The trickster is paradoxical, maddening, and ultimately essential. Because disruption is how stagnant systems break open. Because sometimes the only way to grow is for everything you've carefully built to get knocked sideways. When trickster energy shows up in your life, and it will, it often shows up as something that seems like a disaster, but is actually liberation in disguise. The relationship that explodes, revealing the truth underneath. The job that falls through, forcing you to finally pursue what you actually wanted. The trickster doesn't comfort you, but it moves you. The great mother. The terrible mother. Every culture has both, and they're two faces of the same archetype. The nurturing mother who provides, who protects, who gives life. And the devouring mother who consumes, who controls, who won't let you separate and become yourself. These aren't just images of actual mothers, though your relationship with your own mother will deeply color how you experience this archetype. They're symbolic representations of the relationship between the self and the forces that both sustain and constrain it. Nature itself. Society. Any institution or relationship that gives you life, but also demands conformity in return. Understanding these archetypes helps you see the symbolic dimension of struggles that might otherwise feel purely personal. The person who can't leave an unhealthy relationship isn't just weak. They're caught in a symbolic drama with the terrible mother archetype, needing to find the psychological resources to separate, to individuate, to stand alone before they can truly connect with others as equals. Now let's get deeply personal for a moment, because this isn't just theory. This is about you and your life right now. Think about a symbol that has followed you, a recurring image in your dreams, an image in a piece of art that you can't look away from, that does something to you that you can't fully explain, a story that you've returned to again and again throughout your life because something in it feels true in a way that goes deeper than plot, a fear or an obsession that seems out of proportion to any rational explanation. That symbol is a communication. It's your unconscious mind, that 11 million bits per second processing power, trying to tell you something that your conscious, verbal, logical mind hasn't been able to hear yet. The question isn't whether the message is there. The message is always there. The question is whether you're willing to receive it. And receiving it doesn't mean you have to undergo years of psychoanalysis, though that can be genuinely valuable. It can start with something much simpler. It can start with sitting quietly with the symbol and asking it questions. What are you? What do you represent in my life? What are you trying to show me? What would change if I really heard you? This might sound strange. It might feel silly at first. You might feel self-conscious talking to an image in your imagination. But every major therapeutic tradition that has worked with the unconscious, Jungian analysis, Gestalt therapy, EMDR, internal family systems, and active imagination all involve some version of this. Learning to have a conversation with the parts of yourself that speak in symbols rather than words. Let's talk about color, because color is one of the most immediate and powerful symbolic languages the unconscious uses. Red. Almost universally across cultures, red is the color of blood, passion, danger, and life force. Red increases heart rate. It signals both love and threat. When you see red in a dream, pay attention to the context. Is it nourishing? Is it threatening? Is it a wound, or is it vitality? Blue. Sky and water. Depth and expansion. Many people experience blue as calming, as expansive, as connected to something larger than themselves. Blue in dreams often signals a transition toward calm, toward clarity, or toward a need for those things. Black. Not evil, as popular culture sometimes suggests, but unknown. The unconscious itself. Possibility that hasn't yet taken form. The night that precedes the dawn. Many of the most important processes of the psyche happen in the dark, in the unseen, in the not yet known. White. Purity, yes, but also emptiness. The blank page. The potential that hasn't been filled yet. And in some Eastern traditions, white is the color of death and mourning, not because death is pure, but because death is the great emptying that makes room for new life. Gold. Across virtually every culture and every era, gold represents the highest value, the most essential truth, the self as it fully realizes itself. In alchemy, the whole symbolic project was turning base metals into gold. But Jung showed that this was never really about chemistry. The alchemists were mapping a psychological process. The work of turning the raw, unrefined material of a life into something precious, meaningful, and truly yourself. Let's talk about numbers because numbers are one of the oldest and most widespread symbolic systems humans have used. One is unity, wholeness, the self before division. In many traditions, one is the divine itself, or the state of pure being before multiplicity. Two is division, polarity, the creation of opposites. Every two represents a fundamental tension, light and dark, conscious and unconscious, self and other, masculine and feminine. The number two often appears when the psyche is working with a dualism, a split it needs to reconcile. Three is dynamic. Three creates movement. Father, Son, Spirit. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Beginning, middle, end. Three introduces time and process into what was static. Three is often the number of transformation. Four is stability and completion. For seasons. For directions. For elements. Jung was fascinated by the symbol of the quaternity, the four-part structure, because it kept appearing in his patients' dreams and art as a symbol of psychological wholeness. When something in your inner world organizes itself into a stable, four-part structure, that often signals integration, a bringing together of opposites into a coherent whole. 7 is the number of mystery and spiritual seeking across so many traditions. It's almost impossible to list them all. 7 days of creation. 7 chakras. 7 classical planets. 7 deadly sins. 7 wonders. Something about 7 resonates with the human sense of completion tinged with mystery, of something that is whole but still contains the unknown. Now here's something that might shift how you see everyday life. The symbolic language of the unconscious doesn't just show up in sleep and mythology. It shows up in the choices you think are purely practical. The car you drive, the house you decorate, the clothes you wear, the way you arrange your physical space. All of these are symbolic communications, expressions of the inner world made visible in the outer world. Not always consciously, not always intentionally, but always meaningfully. Psychologists who study the psychology of space have found that the way people arrange their environments is deeply revealing of their inner states. Someone who fills their home with objects, with color, with texture, is often someone who experiences the world through sensation, who needs richness and stimulation to feel alive. Someone who keeps their space stark and minimal is often someone for whom clarity and order are deeply connected to feeling in control of the inner world. Someone who organizes everything into perfect, labeled systems is often someone managing underlying anxiety by creating external order. Someone who lives in creative chaos is often someone whose inner world is similarly nonlinear, who thinks in connections rather than categories. None of these are judgments. They're just the language of the unconscious made three-dimensional, made real in the physical world. Your body itself is one of the most powerful symbolic communication systems you have. The unconscious doesn't just send messages in dreams. It sends them through physical symptoms, through tension and pain, through where you hold your stress, through the physical sensations that accompany emotions you haven't consciously named yet. The tight chest that shows up before you're consciously aware that you're anxious. The knot in the stomach when something's wrong in a relationship before you've admitted it to yourself. The back pain that arrives whenever you're carrying too heavy a load, literally or figuratively. The throat that closes up when you need to speak your truth and can't. Candace Pert, a neuroscientist who spent her career studying the relationship between emotions and the body, described emotions as the language of the cells. Every emotion creates a corresponding physical state, measurable changes in the biochemistry of your body. And conversely, every physical state creates corresponding emotional experiences. The body and the psyche are not separate systems with the occasional overlap. They are one system, communicating constantly, using the symbolic language of sensation. This is why somatic therapies have become so important in modern trauma treatment. Trauma isn't merely stored in memories that can be discussed. Trauma is stored in the body and nervous system, in physical patterns of tension and armoring that can persist long after the conscious mind has processed the event. Healing requires engaging the body's symbolic language directly. So what do you do with all of this? How do you start actually working with the symbolic language of your unconscious rather than just knowing about it intellectually? The first step is attention. Simply begin to pay attention to the symbols that show up in your life with unusual frequency or unusual intensity. What images keep returning in your dreams? What stories or films move you to tears without a rational explanation? What fears or desires seem bigger than their conscious causes would justify? What figures from mythology, from literature, from your own family history seem to follow you? Write these things down, not to analyze them immediately, but to notice them. The act of writing down a symbol, of giving it your attention in the waking world, is already a form of communication back to the unconscious. It says, I hear you. I'm listening. The second step is inquiry. Once you've identified a symbol that seems important, spend time with it. Not trying to decode it intellectually, because that often produces interpretations that are intellectually satisfying but emotionally dead. Instead, drop into the experience of the symbol. If it's a dream image, close your eyes and bring it back. What does it feel like to be in the presence of this image? What does it want? What would it say if it could speak? Who is it in relation to you? This kind of imaginal inquiry is what Jung called active imagination, and it's one of the most powerful tools for working with the unconscious that has ever been developed. It treats the figures and images of the inner world as real, as having their own intelligence and perspective, and asks you to actually dialogue with them rather than just observing them from a safe analytical distance. The third step is integration. When you receive a message from the symbolic language of the unconscious, the point is not just to understand it. The point is to let it change you. If your recurring dream of the crumbling house is telling you that your sense of self is under strain, what would it mean to respond to that? What would it mean to tend to the foundation? What structures in your outer life or inner life need your attention? If your shadow is showing you, through the people you keep judging and the behaviors that enrage you in others, aspects of yourself you haven't owned, what would it mean to take one small step toward acknowledging that quality in yourself? Not necessarily acting on it, but owning it. Saying, yes, I have that in me too. Integration is where the real work happens. And it's ongoing. There's no moment where you've finished this work, where you've decoded every symbol and integrated every shadow and completed the hero's journey once and for all. The unconscious is not a problem to be solved. It's a relationship to be maintained, a conversation to be continued throughout a lifetime. Because here's the thing. The symbols your unconscious uses to communicate with you will change as you change. The fears that shape your dream landscape at 20 are not the same fears that shape it at 40. The archetypes that dominate your inner world in the first half of life, the hero, the lover, the warrior, the mother or father, begin to shift in the second half of life toward deeper and more mysterious figures. The wise old man or woman, the trickster, the hermit, the self that has moved beyond the need to prove or achieve and is beginning to understand. Jung believed that the work of the second half of life was fundamentally about this shift, about moving from the project of building an ego, a self that functions in the world, to the project of deepening an encounter with the self as a whole, including all the parts that were set aside in the urgency of becoming functional. He called this individuation, becoming who you were always meant to be, not despite your darkness and complexity, but through the full encounter with it. You don't have to be in the second half of your life to begin this work. In fact, starting earlier means living more of your life with this deeper self-knowledge. Means making fewer choices out of unconscious compulsion and more choices out of genuine awareness. Means that the relationships you build, the work you do, and the life you create carry more of you in them. The real you, not just the parts you were told were acceptable. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is not something to be feared or suppressed or conquered. It is the larger part of you, the older part, the part that has been with you since before you had words, before you had a story about who you are, before the world told you what to want and what to become. It speaks in symbols because symbols can hold what language cannot. The symbols are a gift. Learn the language. Listen to the messages. Let the dialogue between your conscious mind and the vast symbolic intelligence of your unconscious become the most important conversation of your life. Because when that conversation opens up, when those two systems start working together rather than against each other, things that used to confuse you start to make sense. Patterns you were trapped in begin to loosen. Fears that seemed irrational reveal their logic. Desires that seemed shameful reveal their wisdom. And the life you're living starts to align, more and more, with who you actually are rather than who you thought you were supposed to be. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Now I want to hear from you. What symbol has been following you? What image keeps showing up in your dreams or in your waking life that you haven't been able to explain? Drop it in the comments. Describe it, no matter how strange or fragmented it seems. And let's talk about what it might be telling you. You might be surprised how many other people are receiving the same message. The language of symbols is ancient, and it's alive in all of us right now. The more we speak it together, the more we hear. Thank you for spending this time going deep with me today. If something in this video shifted something for you, if you found yourself seeing your inner life differently, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because this conversation is just beginning, and what comes next goes even deeper. See you there.